Okay, I'd like to welcome Rachael Conway from Butterfly Conservation, who is going to talk to us all about the Supporting Science project. Now, I invited Rachael to talk because I worked quite closely, as I'm sure she'll mention, in the talk with Rachael on the Supporting Science project. And I truly believe that what we worked on could really change the way that verification and training of verifiers is handled within the sector. I see this very much as a trial with the butterflies and moths, and I think there are applications for other recording schemes. And I think both me and Rachael are really keen to hear from people afterwards about how we can share what we've learned and do more with this. So I'm going to hand over to you, Rachael, now. I'm really looking forward to seeing your talk, and I hope there's no hideous screenshots of me in the presentation.
It won't be. Not intentional. Okay, thanks, Kieran. So our project was called Supporting Science, and it was funded by the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport and the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And our key partners in the themes that we're presenting today were the Field Studies Council and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. So the main theme of the project was to increase digital resilience in the heritage sector. So we were one of 8 projects. We were the only national natural heritage project. And we have also recently been awarded some further support to maximise the impact that we've had during the project. So that's great. So just a thanks to our funders for their support over the period of the project. So I'm really so excited to be delivering this presentation because, as Kieran says, it's got some really topical information about verification. And we've worked really hard over a very short space of time. So in the style of Supporting Science, I'm going to work at pace over the next 10 minutes to try and squeeze a lot in before I hand over to Martha. So how did the project all begin? Well, it started with an internal data review. So here is a bit of a data map. Now, don't get excited. I'm not explaining it to anybody. It's just to demonstrate the complexities of the data flow coming in and the different ways by which it is processed. And we also conducted a county moth recorder survey. And what that showed was that moth recorders have got a huge workload. In the last 20 years, moth records have tripled, and recorders now process about 1.5 million records a year. And it's a similar picture as well for the county butterfly recorders. And traditionally, that has been one person verifying all of the records in their county. We can see from that workload that's not sustainable for many people, and we've heard today as well that there's problems with getting through the workload presented to verifiers and county recorders because they're human beings and they have lives and they're volunteers. So our project actually had 4 themes, but what we're focusing on today is a programme of iRecord training. So that was to bring in new people to try and help with that human side of the data flow. And also we're going to talk about our development of iRecord data management tools, and that's to help with that data flow system side of the verification workload. So the training. The main aim of the training was to really bring new people in and train them up in some ID and improve their confidence and get them to start verifying records, developing verification skills. So over 12 months, Kieran and I developed and delivered 5 training courses of several weeks and several webinars, and we were flying by the seat of our pants the entire time. I have to mention here Robin Hutchinson from the iRecord team was absolutely fantastic. Their partnership in being flexible and responding to our multiple and changing demands as we tried to find this new way of working in a short space of time really helped us deliver this project successfully. So there was 5 courses. There was an initial iRecord verification course we've set out to our network. There was discovering iRecord and moths, that was to bring new people in, the identification courses, and then the final iRecord verification course where we were teaching those new recruits verification skills. Just take a wee sip. So the first one, that was aimed at our county recorder network. We had an expert working group come and join us at the start to give us guidance and feedback and help us through the project. So we opened up this course to them. Some of them joined to help us review the course and contribute feedback because they were already really proficiently working and verifying in iRecord. We opened it up to our county recorder network, and some of them joined in order to develop skills, and they brought verification assistants with them as well. And so we got some really positive feedback to help us develop the final course, and quite a lot of people learned new skills. So we were really pleased with the progress we made there. So then we went on to deliver the Discovering iRecord course. Now, Kieran had been delivering these very regularly through the BioLinks project, but we gave this one that butterfly and moths focus because we were providing that suite of training, which was to bring in new people. You know, we were experimenting with, can we take a new person, bring them in and train them up to a point where they can support with verification? So we had that butterfly and moth focus to, you know, enhance that relevance. 57 people completed it through the project, funded project of ours. 91% enjoyed it and 95% said it was useful. So we were pleased with the outcome there. And I really like this quote. This person really loved the course and they really appreciated the chance to participate flexibly. So we had live webinars. We had 2 timings for the webinars, one in the morning, one in the evening. You could go to either. And if you couldn't go to those, you got a recording. So it was a really flexible way of delivering online training. So the identify, oops, oh heck, revealing too much too soon. There we go. So the identifying distinctive butterflies and identifying distinctive moths courses. These were a huge success. We really wanted to advertise this far and wide to bring in lots of new people. And the strength here was in the partnership, but I'll tell you a little bit about the courses first. So we selected a number of distinctive butterflies and moths. They weren't necessarily the common species because, you know, distinguishing between whites can be difficult. So it was distinctive species, species that were easy to identify, species which represented all of the UK, species that would help with iRecord verification. So if you could learn that species, you could go into iRecord and you could verify all of the records accompanied by a photograph. It included some confusion species to help people start thinking about that in terms of a verification skill. And the expert working group helped us shortlist those species. So we asked them what would be helpful for you if you could have someone go in and do all of your peacocks with accompanied by a photograph and take that workload from you, and also introduce someone new and get them developing skills. So they helped us shortlist. So the strength here in terms of the reach was definitely the partnership, and I just want to really support that collaboration. Kieran had worked very hard in FSC to develop a huge network of people on their mailing list, and butterflies and moths just seems to be a fantastic hook. And we were just astounded because it was an Eventbrite course and literally thousands of people signed up per course. Now, obviously with a free online offer, that doesn't always, you know, convert into participants, but you can see the numbers we got through here. We're still absolutely delighted with the results. So in terms of the distinctive butterflies, 730 participants, and for moths, 842 participants. Butterfly conservation's never seen numbers like that on a training course before. You know, it's just really exciting. And also there in terms of the demographic, you know, almost 3/4 of participants were women. And I don't think that's reflected in the wider recording community. So there was something we were offering there in terms of the flexibility that was really beneficial. Almost a third of the participants were under 35. We were just so excited about this result, and particularly for butterfly conservation, because if you look at some of our other key events, for example, big butterfly count, the under 35 representation is 4%. So you can see what we achieved by partnering with the FSC, which was just brilliant. So pleased with that outcome. And 99% of people on both courses said they enjoyed it and they would recommend it. So that was really great. So how does that relate to iRecord? Well, the species that we used in the course were obviously ones that we want to go on and train people to verify on iRecord. We wanted to increase people's confidence so that they're submitting better records, because better records submitted makes for easier verification. And we also just wanted to invite more people into our world and start thinking about verification skills at a very early stage in their biological recording career. So why should we not be thinking about verification alongside of recording and start embedding that really early on? Need to take another little sip here, excuse me. So this was our final. I've got a lot to say here, so I just need to get my notes in order. This was our just huge achievement. We were so pleased with this. So we're at the point now where we've got a lot of people who have been trained in some basic species that would be very easily identified. And you could easily verify in or iRecord if they were accompanied by a photograph. So we invited the participants from the previous courses to apply for the iRecord verification course. That course was overwhelmingly popular. I could have filled it 3 times over. We had a limited number of places, but there is great interest in verification out there. I think that's the message I want to tell you, is that people really want to get involved with verification. One of the benefits of this course is that we worked on live data sets. Now, I want to thank Robin again here, because we didn't just say to Robin, oh, please could you just go and click all of these little accounts and access them to a data set. Every single participant had a different setup and a different data set in a different way. And Robin accommodated all of that. And that was fantastic for letting people work on live data sets in a way that the county recorder felt comfortable with. So we said, we're not letting them loose on all of your data. They're just going to work on the peacocks that are accompanied by a photograph, or the buff tips accompanied by a photograph. So that gave county recorders the confidence to become mentors. And this was a real highlight for our participants, that they were having a go at data for real. So let's have a look at the results. We got 25 people completed the course. 20 went on to volunteer with us as iRecord verification assistants. So they want to be out there working on data sets with county recording verification teams. 14 of them stayed with their mentor county recorder. So what does that tell you about the success of this training? Those county recorders who took that leap of faith and came forward, they kept their mentees to keep working on the data sets, because we proved it could work. And that's a great way of bringing new people in. And the success of this was all down to the shared philosophy that we had between the organisations, between Butterfly Conservation, the Field Studies Council, and the team at iRecord, CEH. We all believe that you need to get people learning verification skills early. And, if you can do this, then you're removing those barriers that prevent people from putting themselves forward for verification roles. There seems to be a bit of a veil of mystique about being a county recorder. And, I've spoken to people and said, why don't you get involved in helping us with county recorders? They're, oh, I've only been recording 10 years. And it's like, you don't need to be recording really for any length of time. You just need to know what you're doing and be able to do some basic tasks that we can train you to do, under the guidance of your county recorder. So there's a big lesson there to us about opening doors to new people and inviting them in and saying, yes, you can do this, and we'll provide you with the training and resources you need to do it. So, however, more needs to be done. We've done very well in terms of females and youth. For example, on this course, 76% of the participants were female. And that compared with 29% who joined in the first course from the existing network. But we've got more to do. We need to find a way of including more people from diverse backgrounds and identities. Now, we're still evaluating the lessons that we've learned through supporting science in that respect, but more work needs to be done there. We need to make sure now, as the project nears its end, that we don't lose this momentum. So we want to keep supporting these new volunteers through a verification role. So keep developing their skills so that they're heading towards being the county recorders of the future, because we know there's difficulty there in recruiting in some areas, getting a county recorder in role. We've also need to start finding placements for these new recruits and getting young people, new people linked up with county recorders and contributing to their workload. We don't want to lose the momentum gain. So that's why we're really thankful to our funders for awarding us some additional support so we can really embed some of that learning and make sure that we can keep things going after the project is finished. There's just a little quote saying how people enjoyed being part of that verification community, which was really nice actually in that course. So in terms of reflections, developing early verification skills helps submit better quality records. If you know what your verifiers are looking for, it helps you to put a better record in. Early verification skills will better support succession into county recording roles. Volunteers can support verification digitally, and they can do it at our distance. Many of our recruits, our new volunteers and our mentees, they were in a different county to their mentor, but they still were able to help with their data set. A team approach really helps address that county recorder workload. Offering training in new places with great flexibility broadens participation. And offering flexible training attracts more people from a wider area. Offering flexible training attracts more women and young people. And we found as well through the project that online training wasn't a barrier to older people. The 75+ age group, for example, were well represented. But we do need to do more in terms of broadening our reach to people from more diverse backgrounds and identities. So I realise this is a whistle-stop tour, but this is what supporting science has been like. So finally, the next steps. Let's all encourage more flexible online learning that's going to appeal to as many people as possible, because the more people we've got in our network, the better. Let's encourage people to support verification early on. Let's, give them your vote of confidence. Oh, you're good at that. You'd have no problems, identifying all of the small tortoiseshell records or all of the, the swallowtail moth records. So you get on board and start getting people into verification skills early on. We're running the Identifying Distinctive Moths course again, because that's just ready to go again as a self-led course. So that's going to be run again in June. And also from our end, we're going to be embedding the recording and verification materials we've developed through the project into Butterfly Conservation's volunteering training, and that will be open to our volunteers so that they will be able to access verification skills at an early stage. So thanks to everyone who's been involved with this project. It's been a really intense project, but very good fun. And we're so proud of what we're achieved. I hope Kieran will give his nod of support when after Martha has finished presenting. But just let's open up and get more people in and get them trained. I think that's the takeaway message. So finally, I'm going to pass on to Martha. I hope I haven't run over too much. I tried to go as fast as I could. And this is not the first time I've been happy to hand over to Martha, who came in to help us with a really big chunk of the project. And Martha was recruited because our lottery support person actually suggested we bring in a consultant to help with part of the project. And I very much recommend that if you're running a project and you need expertise, bring it in from outside for someone who really knows what they're doing. So Martha, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rachel. And also thank you for asking me to take part and share the platform with you on this, because it's great to be able to talk about this piece of work. So I'm Martha. I'm the lead consultant for Tech Works for Us. We're a digital consultancy. And I'm going to talk a bit about a different part of the supporting science project, which was around turning user needs into product development. I'm really conscious of time, so this is going to be a real whiz through it, but I can answer more questions in the chat for a little bit afterwards. And I'm generally happy to answer questions, so feel free to @ me on any of those Twitter handles or get in touch in other ways. So I am coming at this from a slightly different perspective from some of the other speakers today, from tech and from the world of digital, but the subject of conservation and the environment is very close to my heart. So this was a really ideal project for us to be working on. And in honor of some of the learning I've done around butterflies and moths as a part of this, I've included some of our local glanville fritillaries throughout the presentation, not least because they're helpfully on brand with my colour scheme. So I think Rachel's kind of already given a bit of background to this project and the sort of understanding of the challenges that verifiers were experiencing. So they knew that Butterfly Conservation knew that they wanted to help, and in order to do that, to kind of improve those data management and verification tools, they wanted to really understand what those user needs were. And I think that's very wise. Like, the more you know about what the users are actually experiencing, how they're using it, the better you can tailor those tools and changes to fit. Very early on, there was a decision to focus on iRecord rather than trying to develop anything new, because it's already so widely used. I think by upwards of 2/3 of moth and butterfly verifiers. And as mentioned, they wanted to bring in outside expertise, particularly useful when doing user research with a group that you know well, because having a third party, having someone impartial can be really helpful for that. A bit of background noise. I don't know if somebody's unmuted, just want to double check. I don't think it's coming from me. So the approach that we took, so I'm going to talk about the approach that we took. I'm going to talk about some of the findings and then some of the changes that have been made as a result on iRecord, some of which are live or about to be live, but some of it might be a bit of a sneak preview. And I'm sure Martin might be saying a little bit more about that later, so I won't go into huge detail, also looking at time. So the first thing that we did, the first thing that I did, as I often do in these projects, is check what people know already. You don't want to start duplicating research and duplicating effort. But I also knew already from what I discussed with Butterfly Conservation that they had some previous surveys, that they'd been collecting some more ad hoc feedback along the way, and that there's quite a lot of staff insights. People within Butterfly Conservation, some of whom are verifiers themselves, already knew quite a lot about some of the challenges that were being faced by verifiers. So we used that to develop a research framework. And all that really means is sort of getting specific about the research questions that you're answering. So these are going to be like, where are the gaps in what you already know? And what are the assumptions that need to be checked? And then looking at that can identify the best methodologies to answer them. And because we already had some of that data, we knew some of the issues. We really wanted to get into sort of behind that, into why people were having these issues and how they were doing things in practice. So we knew that if you're trying to answer those sorts of how and why questions, number data, quantitative data often just raises more questions. What you need is something really qualitative to kind of get at that. So we knew we would want to do some user interviews to sort of really discuss that in detail. And also, one of the advantages of being able to do this remotely is if I can do that over Zoom, I can also ask people to share their screens and show me the process that they're using. And that often will tell a slightly different story from one that people tell me if they're, if they're just talking about what they do. So that was really useful. And we also wanted to make sure that we recruited like a balance of participants. We wanted people who both were and weren't using iRecord, so we can understand about some of the reasons why people don't. And we also wanted to make sure that we had a balance of people from different regions, some people who are working in teams and some people who are working solo. And the questionnaire enabled us to do that. And it also unusually helpful to have sort of an existing database to go out to rather than just recruiting from the general public. So that was really great. So that's what we did, and put together 12 interviews with verifiers. each of which were up to an hour long. And that, I gave people the option to sort of cut that at 30 minutes, but most people really wanted to talk. This was a very unusually engaged and involved user group, which was so fantastic to work with. People have put a lot of thought and effort into preparing, in many cases, for these interviews, and in some cases even preparing presentations. So I ended up with just a huge amount of really rich data, and I'm just extremely grateful to all the people that took part for all the sort of time and effort that they put into it. That left us with sort of lots of information, and that was distilled into a report, which was then presented to stakeholders and the expert working group to help sort of sense check those results, to make sure they were sort of chiming with what people might expect to see. There's nothing that felt odd or wrong, which was the case. It's kind of validated that those findings, and also to allow people to interrogate the data a bit further. So like, well, hang on, what about this? What about that? And I could go back and check. And then we took, I was just going to show you very quickly the research questions that we used to sort of form the research were, nothing, it's not really rocket science. We wanted to check that there wasn't anything that had been missed in the existing knowledge about issues that people were experiencing. And we wanted to see what changes would have the most impact, to understand what were causing like the biggest, most time consuming issues that people were facing, to know how to kind of prioritize that in terms of, what would have a big impact as well as what's feasible. And we also wanted to know a bit about how people were using other systems, to see what we could learn from that. So all of that was taken into, and I'm just going to very quickly show you the board that we use. This is the giant mural board that we distilled all of those findings into. Hopefully you can see that, like a big kind of wall of post-its that starts off very messy over to the left, where we're just throwing everything in, talking about implications, potential solutions, with this, then that kind of ideas. And then as we sort of move further to the right, you then see that we have the kind of a much tidier roadmap, which included stuff that I'm not going to show you all the kind of the full detail of that, but divided everything up into these epics or work areas, and then within that subdivided those into tasks, and then talked in more detail about how we were going to tackle that. And those sort of work areas have formed the basis of how we've continued to communicate with people about the changes in different areas. So, for example, improving.
Martha, sorry, are you sharing it now? Because we can't see it.
Oh, okay. Yes, I am, but obviously it's not quite worked.
Yeah, I think you just might have to stop sharing and then share again.
No, it's all right. We'll move on, because it will probably take too much time to do that. It's imagined like a big post-it wall that starts messy and starts looking like really neat at the end. It's probably better in your head anyway. So the kind of the work areas were, for example, improving the communication system, or looking at the user experience, and within that's subdivided into various different tasks. So the headline findings, and this was the same slide that I shared to that expert working group. As we've already said, for some people, verification is really time consuming. And for some people, that's overwhelming. Not for everybody. Not everybody has a huge number of records coming in. But certainly anything that could improve the process and make it more efficient would be very welcomed. Interestingly, this is a very small, compared to other products that I've worked on in digital, a small and expert user group, and lots of them are already innovating their own solutions. So there was lots that we could learn from the ways that people have found workarounds or different strategies for tackling them. There was some variation. There were some issues that were just specific to certain people, but there are also lots of common themes that came through. But then in particular, there was very much a willingness to adapt. So people weren't being like super rigid about the way that they were doing things. They recognized that even if they hadn't been using iRecord a lot, but that the records that were coming in through iRecord were really valuable, and that was only going to grow. And in some cases, were actively encouraging that within their local groups. There was an small but increasing need for collaborative working, which makes sense given the workload. Most identifications coming through were correct, but still the ones that aren't are the ones that often take the time in terms of querying or redetermining or checking and so on. And also that there were some issues that were not going to be solved by software development that were strategic. And that doesn't mean that those things were sort of dropped. They were sort of taken to a different part of work. So these are just focusing, and then I'm just going to show a few of the changes that were made as a result of more specific findings. and sort of preview some of those a little bit. But I'm using the word changes because I think I just want to be clear that whenever you kind of launch something, we use a tested stuff that before it goes out and you launch it. But even so, like once it goes out, it doesn't mean that's the end of it. You kind of, you want to keep changing, keep kind of monitoring, iterating on that. So I'm sure that, as these things are launched, there's still opportunities for those things to be further developed. So one of a key finding was that there was a huge importance in being able to communicate well with recorders. We've already heard from other people, like knowing the recorders is really important in terms of, partly being able to know what their experience is and whether they're likely to be accurate, but also in terms of encouraging them and providing good feedback. This needed to be flexible, but there were some issues people were having. So having to create a new comment each time is really time consuming. So some people were creating a document and then copy pasting that text in. The notification, there was a suspicion the notifications weren't getting through because a lot of people weren't hearing back. And there were sort of minor user interface niggles that people were having. For example, you type in the comment and you go, oh, I need to check the record, and you go back. And then when you come back into the comment box, it was gone. So some of these things suggested some pretty neat fixes, changing some of the ways that notifications worked, fixing that issue where the comment disappears. You can also now move the comment box around, but particularly adding in templates. So rather than talking that through, let's just show you what that looks like. So now when you go in and add a comment, you'll see there's an opportunity to save that comment as a template, so you can then reuse it or to load a previous one. And actually within that, you can also add sort of placeholder tokens for things like species name or other things where you want the comment to be automatically populated relevant to that specific record. So that hopefully will be quite time saving, and it'll be interesting to see how people find that in practice. We already talked about the importance of photos for identification, and obviously extremely valuable, but the more photos you have, the more time it takes to verify. That came through quite strongly. And part of that is because if you have a photo, you absolutely have to double check it. And the current interface made that kind of hard, not least because some of the images are quite small. So people were, again, employing workarounds such as using the browser to zoom into the screen. So that suggested that a new photo user interface, not replacing the current grid, but that you can use additionally, would be valuable. And again, maybe just showing you this in action is a bit easier. So if, for example, on the main grid, that now has much bigger thumbnails, so that might be enough for people just to be able to see that from those kind of slightly bigger images. But if you click through, it now functions slightly more like a slideshow. So you can move through and all the verification buttons are right there. And there are also keyboard shortcuts. Interestingly, the research found that people were very unaware of the keyboard shortcuts, and that can actually really speed things up. So another kind of bit of work and thinking is how to make people more aware of some of those existing strategies that you can use and efficiencies. The automatic checks, the record cleaner checks that put up the flags and other symbols, some people were finding useful, but a lot of them found that they just weren't specific enough to their local area or the needs of the type of records that they were getting in. So again, there is now the ability, not quite live yet, I think, but on its way to add local user created rule sets. Here's a kind of a sneak preview of that. So there'll be a bit of work to sort of set up your rule sets, and then once that's in, you'll be able to sort of filter and use that as a way to check records as well. There's loads. There's so much more I could talk to. The research was fascinating, and there was just really lots of things that have come out of it. But some of the other bigger things were that some people, I think maybe in the chat, this has already been talked about, there are reasons why people can't share data publicly. So there is now in the process of, it's basically being built, but not quite launched. Still some other work to do around that, a non-public data area. Performance issues came up a lot, the speed of iRecord, particularly at certain times of the day. And there's been already some work to address that, and some ongoing work that's sort of well recognized within iRecord and UKCEH. We carried out a user experience review with an expert UX designer to have a look at areas of the way that the interface looks and the user journey to see if that could be improved. And there's been some really useful suggestions from that, which are being still worked on and still thought about. We've decided to be out of scope for this, but none of that stuff's been junked. That's all kind of gone into sort of future thinking. And also some improvements to the uploader tool based on feedback. So the next steps, like as I said, all this stuff goes live, but that doesn't mean that's the end of it. There's been monitoring and evaluation, still, I'm sure, welcoming feedback and using that to continue to iterate. Obviously, this research was just with Lepidoptera verifiers, and I've since been commissioned by UKCEH and have just completed the report on a similar research with other taxon groups. As I mentioned, further kind of UX considerations still being considered. And there was a bunch of stuff that was sort of considered out of scope and has gone on to a future roadmap. So I'm sure Butterfly Conservation will continue to sort of communicate that with their users, as well as UKCEH, as all of this sort of exciting new stuff gets launched. Thank you very much.